Usually when you buy the newest version of some tool, like a power drill or something, you just expect it to be better, right? Like a stronger motor, better grip.
Yeah, exactly. Straight line up.
Right. You pay the premium, you get the definitive best version.
Yeah.
But step into the ultra premium smartphone market today, and that linear path just totally vanishes.
Oh, it's gone.
Yeah. And welcome to another deep dive, by the way. Today, we're focusing on Marques Brownlee's really extensive review of the new Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra. And man, we're looking at a landscape where progress isn't just a simple upgrade anymore. It's like a negotiation.
It really is. It is honestly the absolute definition of a technological compromise. You're no longer just buying better specs. You're actually sitting there deciding which features you are willing to sacrifice just to get the new ones.
Yeah.
Because every single engineering choice here, it pulls resources or, well, physical space from something else.
Totally. So our mission today for you, the listener, is to really look past the marketing hype.
Yeah.
We want to examine this $1,300 device strictly from a power user's perspective, right?
Yeah.
Specifically zeroing in on the display and the design. Because the core theme we have to explore today is, well, it's a tough pill to swallow. Basically, every single feature on this phone is a trade-off. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
To understand the biggest friction point of this phone, I think we have to start with the screen. I mean, it's the hardware you interact with the absolute most.
Right, obviously.
And on the S26 Ultra, it has received a massive and honestly super controversial update.
Yeah, it has. And, on paper, it sounds like business as usual for a Samsung flagship, right? You're looking at this massive 6.9-inch OLED display.
Massive.
Yeah, huge. It boasts a 1440p resolution, and it's got that incredibly smooth variable refresh rate, so it goes from 1 to 120 hertz.
Right, and those numbers sound fantastic. But the big innovation here, the headline feature they're literally using to sell this device is something called a privacy display.
Yeah.
And I just need to be super clear here. This isn't some software trick. It's not like a dark mode. This is a physical hardware level innovation that is literally baked into the glass. You can toggle it on or off for specific apps. So think about having it automatically activate only when you say, open your banking app, or when you're texting, or even just for incoming notifications on your lock screen.
And as a concept, it is an incredibly useful innovation for privacy. When you activate it, it completely blocks all viewing angles, both horizontal and vertical, when you're off axis.
So no shoulder surfing.
Exactly. Anyone trying to snoop over your shoulder just sees a pitch dark screen.
Okay, so I understand the what, but the how is what I really want to dig into here. Because the review mentions it utilizes two distinct types of pixels on the screen. So there are standard wide-angle pixels and then narrow-angle pixels. How does a pixel actually become narrow-angle, physically?
Yeah, so it basically comes down to microscopic physics. Normally, an OLED pixel emits light that scatters outward in roughly a 180-degree dome, right?
Okay.
Which is what allows you to see the screen from almost any angle. But for the narrow-angle pixels on the S26 Ultra, Samsung actually manufactured a microscopic focusing lens.
No lens.
Yeah, sitting directly over the pixel. It's kind of similar to a lenticular lens. This tiny physical lens forces the light to shoot dead straight ahead in a really tight column rather than scattering everywhere.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's remember those ribbed plastic holographic cards we had as kids?
Oh, yeah, the ones where the image changes depending on how you tilt it.
Exactly, because the plastic ridges are physically directing the light to your eyes.
That's a very similar optical principle, actually, just scaled down to a microscopic level.
Right.
So you basically have a grid where half the pixels are normal and the other half have these tiny light funnels.
Right.
And when you turn the privacy mode on, the phone simply shuts off the wide-angle pixels entirely, so only the funneled light remains.
Which introduces the massive, just unavoidable trade-off, because you are physically turning off half the pixels on the screen.
Yeah.
Your resolution is literally cut in half the second that privacy mode is active.
It is.
And Marques actually put this under a microscope in his review. You can visually see blockier edges around text. You completely lose the fine contrast in those small details.
You do, yeah. And because half the light-emitting diodes are now totally dark, the overall peak brightness of the screen drops significantly too.
Wait, hold on. If the screen gets inherently darker by turning off half the pixels, but the phone is obviously trying to maintain a perceived level of brightness for the user, isn't it driving the remaining active pixels twice as hard? Doesn't that just absolutely nuke the battery life, or at least risk screen burn-in?
Yep, that is exactly the concern Marquise raised, and it's why the everyday trade-offs of this screen go way beyond just battery anxiety. It pushes those remaining pixels to their absolute limit. But the compromises don't actually stop when you turn the privacy feature off.
Oh, great.
Yeah, even when you're just using the phone normally, like with all the pixels fired up, your viewing angles are permanently worse than last year's S25 Ultra.
Well, because half of your pixels are permanently wearing those little narrow-angle focusing lenses,
The
right? You
flagship.
just magically scatter light again just because you flipped a software toggle. The physical glass is still there.
Exactly. You are permanently sacrificing everyday visual fidelity for a totally situational utility. You lose brightness off-axis no matter what you do. And to add insult to injury for the true power users, the anti-reflective coating, which, by the way, was highly praised on the S25 Ultra.
Oh, yeah, it was great.
It's a noticeable downgrade here. It catches way more glare, and on top of that, it is an 8-bit display simulating 10-bit color.
Okay, let's pause there for a second, because display tech gets incredibly jargon-heavy really fast. We hear 10-bit color thrown around a lot by all these competing flagships. If this is natively an 8-bit panel, how exactly is it simulating that higher color depth?
Right, so it uses a technique called frame rate control, or dithering.
Okay.
So an 8-bit panel can natively display about 16 million colors, while a true 10-bit panel can display over a billion.
That's a huge jump.
Massive. So to bridge that gap and smooth out color gradients, like, say, a sunset in a photograph where you'd normally see banding, the 8-bit screen rapidly flashes two alternating colors back and forth.
Oh, I see.
And it happens so fast that your brain just blends them together to perceive a third intermediate color that the screen can't actually produce natively.
So it's basically just an optical illusion to save money on the panel. I mean, it's like buying a high-end luxury sports car, right? Like an absolute beast of a machine. But then you outfit it with heavy, knobby off-road tires just in case you ever hit a dirt road.
That's a good way to put it.
Sure, you get a really cool, highly specific utility for that one moment you need it, but you have permanently compromised the everyday driving experience on the highway.
And what's fascinating here is how Samsung has actually chosen to handle this reality right out of the box. They are fully aware of these visual compromises and the battery strain. So by default, this incredibly expensive 1440p phone is set to a 1080p resolution in the settings.
Wait, are you serious? They intentionally downgrade the resolution out of the box just so people don't notice the battery drain.
Yep. They know that casual users probably won't notice the difference and will just, appreciate the slightly longer battery life. But the power users, Marques calls pixel peepers,
Right.
the people who specifically buy an Ultra device for maximum specs, they're going to dive straight into the settings, immediately switch it back to 1440p, and they're the ones who are going to suffer the visual downgrades the most. They'll be the ones noticing the blockier text and the worse viewing angles because they expect perfection.
That is wild. Okay, so if the screen requires a physical compromise, what about the rest of the body? Because this hardware friction, this idea of physically changing the device in a way that introduces new problems, that's happening on the chassis too, right?
Oh, definitely. The physical form factor has been tweaked to be slightly thinner, slightly lighter, and it features rounder corners now. Oh, and they switched the frame material back from titanium to aluminum.
Which makes absolutely zero functional difference to how you hold or use the phone.
Functionally, no difference at all. Though Marques rightly pointed out, it does open the door to a lot of jokes about Samsung, copying the iPhone's use of titanium last year only to drop it the moment the trend cooled off.
Of course. But the rounded corners in that thinner body, they do have functional consequences. I mean, if you're listening to this and you've never used a Galaxy Note or an Ultra, this might sound incredibly nitpicky.
Sure.
But for the power users out there who pull that stylus out 30 times a day to sign PDFs or take notes, having to physically look down and align the pen every single time, that's a massive disruption to your workflow.
And that disruption is entirely due to the new rounded design. Because the bottom corners of the phone are curved now, the top of the S Pen slot is also curved to match the frame.
Right.
On last year's model, the bottom was totally flat. You could blindly just jam the S Pen back into the phone without even looking. It was omnidirectional.
Yeah, so easy.
But now, the S Pen can only be inserted one specific way. You have to look at it, rotate the pen, align the curve perfectly, and then insert it.
It is just pure friction. And then there's the back of the phone. the new camera plateau, the lenses sit on these raised rings, which then sit on a larger raised plateau. And because they made the main body of the phone thinner to chase that sleek aesthetic, the difference in height between the back glass and the camera lenses is much more pronounced.
Yeah, the review explicitly noted that this makes the phone rock viciously when you place it flat on a table to type.
Viciously.
Yeah, unless, of course, you use a super thick case to level it out. But evaluating the naked hardware, it is just a glaring regression in stability.
Like if I am paying $1,300 for a device literally marketed as an ultra productivity machine, why are we making it harder to quickly put the stylus away? And why is it impossible to type on a flat desk without the phone violently wobbling around? It makes no sense.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you're seeing a really intense industry-wide struggle right now. There is this overwhelming pressure to maintain aesthetic homogeneity. Manufacturers desperately want their flagship to look like every other sleek, thin, rounded premium phone on the market.
Right.
But that sleek aesthetic is actively warring against the utilitarian, brutalist, power user roots of the Ultra lineage. Making it thin and rounded looks great on a billboard, but it actively degrades the functionality that defined the device in the first place.
Which brings us to a really fascinating contrast, I think. Because they were willing to take massive risks and totally overhaul the screen, right? But when it came to the battery, they played it incredibly safe. This obsession with trimming millimeters introduces us to, basically, the missing fundamentals.
Yeah, the battery capacity remains exactly the same at 5,000 milliamp hours. Now, the new processor and the software are slightly more efficient, and it charges at 60 watts now, which is a nice bump.
Sure.
But the review specifically highlights a battery test by Arun, known as Miss Who's the Boss, on YouTube.
Oh yeah, his tests are great.
Yeah, and his test shows the S26 Ultra actually getting beaten by older phones.
Okay, wait. I hear this thrown around a lot lately. Older competing phones are utilizing newer battery technology, right? Specifically, these silicon-carbon batteries.
Yeah.
How is swapping graphite for silicon actually netting these older phones better battery life than a brand new Ultra?
It all comes down to how the lithium ions are actually stored. Traditional smartphone batteries use graphite anodes, and graphite is structurally stable, but it can only hold a very limited number of lithium ions. Silicon, on the other hand, is incredibly greedy.
Greedy.
Yeah, a single silicon atom can bind to 4 lithium ions, meaning it can hold vastly more energy in a much smaller physical space.
So why hasn't everyone been using silicon this whole time?
Well, because when silicon absorbs all that lithium, it swells up by nearly 300%. It would literally crack and degrade after just a few charge cycles.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's bad.
Exactly. What competing manufacturers have done recently is figure out how to stabilize the silicon by combining it with carbon structures. So that allows for massive capacity without the explosive swelling. But Samsung, however, chose to stick with the older, traditional graphite battery tech.
And that's not the only baffling omission.
Yeah.
Still no Key 2 magnetic charging. And the S Pen still doesn't have Bluetooth for remote camera shutter controls. Here's where it gets really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Leaving out magnetic charging on a $1,300 phone in 2026. It's like building a futuristic smart home, but forgetting to install standard power outlets. Sure, the tech is great, but you're making my daily life incredibly annoying for absolutely no reason. How does a flagship phone not have standard magnets?
It is a glaring omission, and frankly, Samsung is just playing it incredibly safe here. We know they have a history with traumatic battery issues from years past, right? Which likely makes them highly conservative when it comes to adopting new power technologies or changing internal thermals.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But this raises an important question regarding their ambition. By refusing to integrate cutting-edge silicon-carbon tech or standardizing magnetic charging, Samsung completely missed out on making a device that could have won Phone of the Year or Most Improved. They prioritize a slightly thinner aluminum frame over giving power users a massive battery leap or just the universal utility of magnetic accessories.
Yeah.
They artificially lowered the ceiling for what could have been a true, uncompromising phone.
Okay, so the hardware is locking us into physical compromises, and the battery is lagging behind the industry curve. Does the software actually make up for it? Because if I'm dealing with wobbly typing, a dimmer screen, and missing magnets, the internals in the new OS better be doing my taxes for me.
Well, internally, it is an absolute powerhouse. It's running the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5, which is specifically tuned for Galaxy. In practical terms, it handles heavy multitasking and gaming flawlessly. Samsung completely redesigned the vapor chamber cooling system to fit into that smaller internal volume, and it dissipates heat wonderfully.
Okay, that's good. And I know they tweaked the cameras, but is it a noticeable physical difference or just more software processing? Because the Ultra is usually defined by its hardware cameras.
It is a real physical upgrade. They widened the apertures on both the main lens and the 5x optical zoom lens.
Nice.
You're physically pulling way more light into the sensor, which gives you incredible low light performance and a creamy, natural background blur. True optical bokeh without relying on fake portrait mode software.
Awesome.
However, returning to our theme of trade-offs,
Of course.
that wider main lens introduces a noticeably worse minimum focus distance. You have to physically pull the phone further back from your subject to get a sharp macro shot.
Trade-offs everywhere.
Yeah.
But the really impressive camera upgrades seem to be driven by software. They added an APV log codec. For the listener who just shoots normal video, what does shooting in log actually do to the image data?
Right, so when you shoot standard video on a phone, the software immediately processes the colors, contrast, and sharpness, so it looks good right away. But it throws away a massive amount of shadow and highlight data to save file space. A log codec, or logarithmic profile, essentially tells the camera to capture absolutely everything the sensor sees, resulting in a very flat, desaturated, gray-looking video.
Okay.
It's designed specifically for professional video editors to take into post-production and color grade manually, because all that rich dynamic range data is perfectly preserved.
Super useful. And then there's horizon lock. I love when features do exactly what their name implies, but the mechanics behind this are actually wild.
Oh, it is a highly aggressive video stabilization feature. So the S26 Ultra has a massive 200 megapixel main sensor. To shoot a quad HD video, you only actually need about 4 to 8 megapixels of resolution.
Wait, really? That's it?
That's it. So Horizon Lock crops way into the very center of that 200 megapixel sensor. It then uses the remaining 190 plus million pixels around the edges as a massive digital buffer.
Wow.
As you physically rotate or shake the phone, the software just moves the active recording window around that giant sensor canvas, keeping the video perfectly level and locked to the horizon. And it can output that stabilized footage at 60 frames per second. It is a phenomenal tool for creators.
That is a genuine, undeniable power user feature. I love that.
Yeah.
But we do have to talk about the rest of the software because Samsung refers to their new AI suite as agentic. And, in computer science, an agentic AI is an autonomous system that can make decisions and take actions on your behalf without constant prompting. But Marques used a slightly different word to describe Samsung's overall AI package here.
Yeah, he called it slop.
Slop.
Yep, it's a buzzword-heavy mixed bag. Some of it genuinely borders on useful, like the call screening feature is excellent for handling unknown numbers, and the audio eraser in video editing does a surprisingly natural job of isolating voices and removing background wind noise.
But then you get to the other end of the spectrum, things like Photo Assist, which allows you to completely fake scenes, adding elements like hot air balloons or reflections to photos that never actually existed in reality.
And Marques noted that a heavily advertised feature called Now Nudge completely failed to work for him during his testing. Though, to Samsung's credit, their AI safeguards did successfully refuse to generate some of the weirder, inappropriate photo edits he tried to force it to make.
Well, that's good at least. Before we bring this all together, I think we need to throw in a really quick but vital public service announcement based on the review. Because while we've been analyzing the $1,300 Ultra, Samsung also released the base S26 and S26 Plus models.
Yes, they did. And the review was very explicit about these.
Right.
They are simply not good deals anymore. The base price has been raised to $900.
$900 for the entry level. And what are you actually getting for that?
A design that is basically unchanged from last year. You are getting the exact same camera hardware they have been using since the Galaxy S23. In many regions outside the US, you're getting an inferior Exynos processor instead of the Snapdragon. And they completely removed millimeter wave 5G support. They are, in the reviewer's exact words, afterthoughts.
Wow. That is a harsh but necessary warning for anyone shopping in that price bracket. So what does this all mean for the person actually buying the S26 Ultra? To me, it feels like this software suite, the generative AI slop, is just a bunch of gimmicks. Call screening is great, but that should just be a software update pushed out to older phones. It couldn't be the primary reason you drop $1,300 on brand new hardware with wobbly cameras and missing magnets.
That is the exact conclusion you have to draw. The genuine power user tools, like the APV log codec and the Horizon Lock, are excellent additions for a very specific niche of creators. But the massive suite of generative AI features is largely a take-it-or-leave-it proposition. It doesn't fundamentally change the daily hardware experience. When you look at the whole package, the S26 Ultra feels less like a revolutionary step forward and more like an iterative S26 Plus Pro Max.
Yeah. To wrap this deep dive up, let's look at the S26 Ultra as a complete picture. It is undeniably a solid, incredibly powerful phone. It introduces a literal one-of-a-kind hardware feature in the privacy display. But if you are the power user, the person this phone is supposedly built for, this device is an absolute masterclass in compromises. You're paying top dollar, but you're forced to accept a permanent downgrade to your screen's core resolution and everyday viewing angles just to have that privacy toggle.
You're accepting daily ergonomic friction with the stylus and the inability to type flat on a desk just so the phone can look a little more like its competitors. You are missing out on modern silicon carbon battery tech and magnetic accessories because the manufacturer is playing it safe on the fundamentals while gambling on the display. When you, the listener, are evaluating a new tool, a new piece of technology for your own workflow, I want you to look past the flashy headline features. Don't just ask what the new thing does. Ask yourself, what permanent, daily friction am I accepting into my life in order to get it? Because as we've seen today, progress at this tier always demands a sacrifice.
And that leaves me with one final thought, just something for you to mull over after we wrap up here. Think back to that privacy display. It required a massive physical structural change to the screen itself. Those tiny microscopic lenses, which permanently downgraded the viewing angles and brightness. If implementing a single new hardware feature now requires a permanent physical downgrade to the device's core functionality, are we finally reaching the absolute physical limits of what a traditional glass slab smartphone can actually do? Have we run out of room in the design to the point where the industry is going to be forced to invent an entirely new form factor just to keep innovating without cannibalizing the basics? It makes you wonder what the next big leap actually looks like, because it clearly isn't a straight lineup anymore.